6 months after the revelation, the galaxy was transforming in ways that no one could have predicted. Marcus stood on the observation deck of New Terra Station, humanity's first joint construction project with their rediscovered ancient allies, watching ships from 100 different civilizations dock at the massive facility. The immediate aftermath of the truth transmission had been chaotic. The Galactic Council had fragmented as member species demanded accountability for millennia of suppression. Several consensus agents had been exposed in positions of power, leading to government collapses on dozens of worlds. For a few terrifying weeks, it had seemed like the galaxy might descend into the same kind of warfare that had destroyed the ancient civilizations. But something different happened this time. Instead of turning against each other, the awakened species had turned to cooperation. The quantum consciousness network that had formed during the revelation had created permanent connections between minds that transcended species barriers. When conflicts arose, they were resolved through direct mental communication rather than political maneuvering. Humanity had found itself at the center of this new galactic alliance, not because they were the most advanced species, but because their genetic heritage connected them to all of the ancient civilizations. Human DNA contained fragments from every lost culture, making them living bridges between the scattered survivors. Marcus had become something he never expected, a diplomat for the new order. His experience as the focal point of the revelation had left him with enhanced consciousness that allowed him to facilitate communication between radically different forms of life. He could understand the crystalline mathematics of the dynasties, the energy patterns of the void dancers, and the quantum logic of the photon shepherds. The integration is proceeding faster than our most optimistic projections, Zara reported, joining him at the observation window. She had become the coordinator for technological sharing between the coalition species, helping to combine their various capabilities into unified systems. "Any word from the consensus territories?" Marcus asked. "They are still maintaining their isolation, but there are signs of internal conflict. Some of their member species are beginning to question the suppression policies." Zara activated a holographic display showing the galactic political map. Large sections remained under consensus control, but the boundaries were shifting as more species broke away to join the growing alliance. "The real test will come when they decide to actively oppose us," Marcus said. "Right now they are still hoping this will burn itself out." Valdric approached them, his enhanced form moving with the fluid grace that Marcus had grown accustomed to. The ancient human had become the de facto leader of the coalition's military planning, preparing for the confrontation that everyone knew was coming. "The Eternal Consensus has begun mobilizing their enforcement fleets," he reported. "Our intelligence suggests they are planning a decisive strike against New Terra Station, hoping to decapitate the Alliance before it can fully form." Marcus felt a familiar chill. Despite all the progress they had made, the galaxy still faced the same fundamental conflict that had destroyed the ancient civilizations. The question was whether they had learned enough from history to avoid repeating it. "What's our defensive capability?" "Better than they expect," Valdric smiled. "The technological integration has produced some surprising results. When you combine human adaptability with Etherian historical knowledge, Crystal Dynasty materials science, and Void Dancer energy manipulation, you get capabilities that none of us possessed individually." As if summoned by their conversation, an alert chimed through the station's communication system. A massive fleet was approaching from consensus space. Hundreds of ships using the standardized technologies that had been imposed on the galaxy for millennia. Marcus made his way to the command center, where representatives from dozens of species were coordinating the defense. The diversity was staggering. Energy beings interfacing directly with quantum computers, crystalline entities calculating probability matrices, and enhanced humans like Valdric processing multiple data streams simultaneously. "Consensus. Fleet will reach engagement range in 30 minutes, reported a Void Dancer whose dark matter sensors could detect ships light years away. "Configuration suggests they are prepared for conventional warfare against known technologies." "Then let us show them what unconventional warfare looks like," said the Crystal Dynasty representative, its faceted body refracting light in complex patterns that served as a form of communication. The defense of New Terra Station became the first battle in what historians would later call the War of Awakening. But it was unlike any conflict the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of meeting the consensus fleet with opposing ships and weapons, the Alliance used coordinated consciousness networks to disable enemy systems without destroying them. Human pilots, linked through quantum fields to Etherian navigators and Crystal Dynasty targeting systems, appeared and vanished around consensus ships like ghosts. Void dancers manipulated space itself, creating dimensional pockets that swallowed enemy weapons fire and redirected it harmlessly into empty space. Photon shepherds infiltrated consensus communication networks, flooding them with the same revelation data that had awakened the galaxy 6 months earlier. Marcus found himself at the center of the battle coordination, his consciousness serving as a relay point between the various Alliance species. Through the quantum link, he could feel the confusion and growing understanding of consensus forces as they experienced the suppressed memories of their own ancient heritage. Ship after ship in the consensus fleet simply stopped fighting as their crews underwent the same awakening that had swept the galaxy. Some vessels broke formation and joined the Alliance forces. Others retreated to report what they had experienced. A few continued fighting, but without coordination or clear purpose. The battle ended not with destruction, but with conversion. The consensus had lost nearly half their fleet to defection, and the remainder retreated to regroup and reconsider their strategy. In the aftermath, Marcus stood again on the observation deck, watching as former consensus ships docked alongside coalition vessels. The crews were experiencing the same wonder and disorientation that had marked the early days after the revelation, as they discovered the true history of their species and their place in the galaxy. "This is how it should have been 50,000 years ago," Valdric said, joining him. "Instead of fearing what we could become, we should have embraced the possibilities." "The consensus still controls a third of the galaxy," Marcus pointed out. "This isn't over." "No, but the pattern has been broken," Zara added, appearing beside them. "For the first time in galactic history, the ancient powers are working together instead of being manipulated into destroying each other." Marcus nodded, feeling the quantum consciousness network that now connected millions of minds across dozens of species. The individual voices had merged into something greater than the sum of their parts. Not a hive mind that suppressed individual thought, but a collective intelligence that enhanced everyone's capabilities. Through the network, he could sense the ongoing transformation of galactic civilization. On Earth, human colonies were sharing the advanced technologies they had recovered, preparing to take their place as equals among the stars. Throughout former consensus territory, species were rediscovering capabilities they had possessed for millennia, but had been prevented from using. The eternal consensus still existed, still convinced that unrestricted development led to catastrophe, but they no longer controlled the narrative of galactic history. The truth had taken root in too many minds, created too many connections, inspired too much hope for a better future. As Marcus watched ships from 100 different civilizations working together to build something unprecedented in galactic history, he realized that his journey from cultural liaison to revolutionary had been more than just personal growth. It had been the awakening of humanity's true potential, and through them, the awakening of the galaxy itself. The ancient civilizations had fallen because they had faced their challenges alone. This time they would succeed because they faced the future together. The girl who had stopped cold when she caught his scent had been right. He was something that shouldn't have existed according to official history. He was proof that the galaxy's greatest achievements were not in the past, but in the future they would build together. The war for awakening would continue, but Marcus no longer feared its outcome. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not as conquerors or survivors, but as the bridge between what was and what could be. The galaxy was finally ready to fulfill the promise that had been interrupted 50,000 years ago, and this time, nothing would stop them from reaching their destiny. The preparation for the Revelation engine took 3 days, during which Marcus learned more about galactic history than he had thought possible. Coalition scientists mapped his neural patterns, analyzed his genetic sequences, and taught him meditation techniques designed to help him maintain consciousness during the quantum bridging process. Valdric shared memories of the original Terran hegemony through a direct neural interface, allowing Marcus to experience what human civilization had been like at its peak. He saw cities that floated in space without artificial gravity, powered by controlled singularities. He experienced the sensation of piloting ships that could slip between dimensions, traveling vast distances in mere moments. He felt the intellectual excitement of humans working alongside alien scientists to unlock the deepest secrets of the universe. But he also saw the gradual corruption of that golden age. The subtle manipulations by consensus agents, the escalating fears and suspicions between civilizations, the growing paranoia that eventually led to the devastating wars. The ancient humans had been so focused on their technological achievements that they had failed to recognize the political forces working to destroy them. "We were brilliant, but naive," Valdrick explained after one particularly intense memory session. "We believed that rational beings would naturally cooperate for mutual benefit. We never imagined that some groups would prefer a galaxy of limited, controlled civilizations rather than risk the chaos of unrestricted growth." Zara spent time teaching Marcus about the other ancient civilizations that had fallen to the same pattern. The Crystal Dynasties, who had learned to encode consciousness into living minerals. The Void Dancers, who could manipulate dark matter and dark energy. The Photon Shepherds, who existed as pure energy and could travel at the speed of light. All had achieved incredible things, and all had been manipulated into destroying each other. "The tragedy is that each civilization had unique insights that could have benefited everyone," she said, showing him records of ancient technologies that made current galactic standard equipment look primitive. Instead of sharing and growing together, they were tricked into seeing each other as threats. On the morning of the planned transmission, Marcus woke to find Haven Station buzzing with activity. Coalition members from across the hidden galaxy had arrived to witness the event. Some appeared in person, others projected themselves through quantum communication arrays, and a few existed as pure information patterns that manifested as shifting geometric shapes. The diversity was overwhelming, but Marcus noticed something interesting. Despite their vastly different forms and origins, all of these beings shared certain characteristics. They were curious, innovative, and willing to take risks for the sake of knowledge and growth. They represented what the galaxy could become if freed from artificial limitations. As Marcus prepared for the neural interface, warning signals began flooding into Haven Station's communication center. Consensus forces had discovered several coalition safe houses and were moving to shut down what they called historical terrorism cells. The timetable for the revelation had been accelerated. "We have perhaps 6 hours before they trace our location," Valdrick reported, his enhanced features showing strain as he processed multiple data streams simultaneously. "The engine is ready, but the transmission window will be brief." Marcus took his position at the center of the device, surrounded by crystalline neural interfaces that would link his consciousness to the quantum field. The coalition members formed concentric circles around him, each group contributing their species' unique understanding of consciousness and reality to the process. "Remember," Zara said as the final connections were made, "you are not just transmitting information, you are sharing the experience of truth itself. Every being in the galaxy will feel what you feel, understand what you understand. Stay focused on the core message. The ancient civilizations were destroyed by manipulation, not natural conflict." The engine powered up with a sound like reality itself, humming. Marcus felt the neural interfaces connecting to his mind, creating pathways for thoughts and sensations he had never imagined. The boundaries of his individual consciousness began to blur as quantum fields aligned across galactic distances. Then, the transmission began. Marcus's awareness exploded outward, touching minds across the galaxy in a wave that traveled faster than light itself. He felt the confusion and fear of beings who suddenly found their thoughts invaded by impossible experiences. But beneath the initial shock, he sensed something else: recognition. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had never heard of the ancient civilizations suddenly remembered them. Genetic memories that had been suppressed for millennia activated, providing context for the flood of historical data. Species that had been told they were primitive newcomers to the galaxy discovered that their ancestors had once traveled between stars as easily as walking between rooms. Through the quantum link, Marcus experienced the revelation from countless perspectives. A Saurian trader on a remote station suddenly understood why certain human technologies seemed familiar. His species had once worked alongside the Terran hegemony as partners in exploration. A crystalline engineer realized that the Innovations her people had developed over thousands of years were actually fragments of knowledge inherited from the ancient crystal dynasties, but the most powerful reactions came from the humans scattered across Earth's colonies. Marcus felt their shock as they experienced memories of their true heritage, their anger as they understood how their development had been artificially limited, and their determination as they realized what they could become. The transmission wasn't one way. As Marcus shared the ancient memories, he also absorbed the experiences of every consciousness he touched. He felt the weight of civilizations that had been manipulated into destroying themselves, the frustration of species that had been held back from their potential, and the growing awareness that the current galactic order was built on lies. Through it all, he sensed the presence of the eternal consensus, minds that radiated cold certainty in their mission to control galactic development. They were not evil in the traditional sense, but they were absolutely convinced that unrestricted growth led inevitably to catastrophic destruction. To them, the suppression of the ancient civilizations had been a necessary sacrifice to prevent worse disasters. But Marcus also felt something the consensus had not expected. Instead of chaos and panic, the revelation was creating unity. Species across the galaxy were not turning against each other in fear. They were recognizing their shared history of manipulation and beginning to work together. The transmission reached its peak as Marcus shared the final, most important memory Valdric had given him. The moment when the last Terran hegemony scientist, facing the destruction of their civilization, had hidden the genetic templates and historical records that would allow their descendants to rediscover the truth. It had been an act of faith across 50,000 years, a belief that knowledge and wisdom would eventually triumph over fear and control. As that memory spread across the galaxy, Marcus felt something unprecedented happen. Millions of minds that had never communicated before began to connect directly, sharing not just information, but understanding itself. The quantum field that carried the revelation was becoming a permanent network, linking consciousness across galactic distances. The consensus forces arrived at Haven Station just as the transmission ended, but they were too late. The truth had already taken root in too many minds to be suppressed. As Marcus disconnected from the engine, collapsing from the effort of maintaining galactic-scale consciousness bridging, he heard reports flooding in from across the galaxy. On Earth, human governments were receiving messages of support from alien species who wanted to share their own suppressed technologies. The Galactic Council was in emergency session, as member species demanded answers about the historical cover-up. And in the deepest regions of space, ancient automated systems that had been dormant for millennia were coming back online, responding to quantum signatures that had not been active since the fall of the original civilizations. "It is done," Valdric said, helping Marcus to his feet. "The galaxy knows the truth. Now we must help them decide what to do with it." As consensus forces surrounded Haven Station, demanding surrender, Marcus realized that the real work was just beginning. The revelation had given the galaxy the knowledge it needed to break free from artificial limitations, but knowledge alone was not enough. They would need courage, wisdom, and cooperation to build something better than what had come before. The ancient civilizations had failed because they had not recognized the threat until it was too late. This time, humanity and their allies had the advantage of understanding their enemy. The question now was whether they could learn from the mistakes of the past and create a future worthy of their inherited potential. Haven Station was unlike anything Marcus had imagined. The corridors were lined with what looked like living crystal that pulsed with soft light, creating an organic feeling despite the clearly artificial construction. The architecture flowed in curves and spirals that seemed to follow mathematical principles beyond his understanding. Zara led him through halls filled with beings from species he had never encountered. Some appeared to be energy constructs contained in geometric frameworks. Others looked like living metals that shifted and reformed as they moved. A few seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially somewhere else entirely. The coalition includes civilizations that officially went extinct thousands of years ago, Zara explained as they walked. "We have been hiding in spaces between the mapped galaxy, preserving our cultures and knowledge, while the eternal consensus believes we were destroyed." They entered a vast chamber that stretched beyond the limits of Marcus's vision. The walls were covered with displays showing star charts, historical timelines, genetic analysis, and technical specifications. At the center of the room stood a figure that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. It was clearly human in basic shape, but enhanced beyond anything he had seen before. The figure was tall and lean, with silver lines traced beneath translucent skin that glowed with inner light. Its eyes were larger than normal human eyes, with irises that seemed to contain swirling galaxies. When it moved, the motion was perfectly fluid, as if gravity affected it differently. Marcus Chen of Earth, the enhanced human said, its voice carrying harmonics that resonated in frequencies Marcus could feel as well as hear. I am called Valdric, though I once bore a different name on a world that no longer exists. I am what your species might become, given time and the proper guidance. Marcus stared, trying to process what he was seeing. You're human? I am what humans were before the fall, Valdric replied. My body has been modified to survive in environments that would destroy unenhanced biology. My mind has been expanded to process information at rates that would overwhelm an unaugmented consciousness. I am a remnant of the Terran hegemony, one of the few who escaped the final destruction. Zara gestured toward the displays surrounding them. Valdric has been studying the patterns behind the Convergence War, trying to understand why the ancient civilizations fell and how to prevent it from happening again. What did you discover? Marcus asked. Valdric moved to one of the larger displays, showing a complex three-dimensional map of the galaxy. The Convergence War was not a natural conflict between competing civilizations. It was artificially engineered by the Eternal Consensus to justify their control over galactic development. The display zoomed in on specific star systems, highlighting trade routes and political connections. The Consensus spent centuries manipulating events, creating tensions between the ancient powers. They provided weapons to both sides of conflicts, ensuring that wars became more destructive. They spread fear about the dangers of advanced technology, while secretly working to escalate those very dangers. Marcus watched as the display showed the progression of the war, civilizations turning against each other in an escalating spiral of destruction. They caused the war to prove that advanced civilizations were dangerous? Exactly. And when the ancient powers had destroyed each other, the Consensus emerged as the only stable force remaining. They established the current Galactic Council system, with built-in limitations designed to prevent any single species from becoming too powerful. Zara activated another display, showing current galactic politics. The same patterns are starting again. Humanity's rapid development has triggered Consensus protocols. They are beginning to manipulate events to create conflicts that will justify intervention. What kind of conflicts? Trade disputes that escalate into territorial claims, cultural misunderstandings that become diplomatic crises, technical failures that appear to be sabotage. Valdric's enhanced eyes focused on Marcus with disturbing intensity. You were not assigned to Station Kepler 442 by chance. The Consensus wanted you there, where they could monitor humanity's integration into galactic society. Marcus felt a chill as he remembered his assignment. Administrator Vex? Almost certainly a Consensus agent, though she may not be aware of it herself. The Consensus prefers to work through intermediaries who believe they are serving the greater good. Zara pulled up personnel records on Vex and several other station administrators. They create bureaucratic systems that automatically implement their policies without requiring conscious conspiracy. So what do we do about it? Valdric smiled, an expression that looked strange on his enhanced features. We do what the Terran hegemony should have done 50,000 years ago. We break the pattern. He led them to a secure chamber deeper in the station, where a team of coalition scientists and engineers were working on something that made Marcus's head spin just to look at it. The device appeared to be a fusion of technologies from dozens of different civilizations, incorporating energy manipulation, quantum mechanics, and spatial geometry in ways that shouldn't have been possible. This is the Revelation Engine, Valdric explained. It can broadcast information directly into the neural networks of every sentient being in the galaxy simultaneously. No censorship, no filtering, no political spin. Just pure, undeniable truth. You're going to tell everyone about the ancient civilizations? We are going to show them. The engine can transmit not just information, but actual memories and experiences. Every being in the galaxy will experience fragments of the true history, the prosperity of the ancient civilizations, the artificial nature of the convergence, war, and the ongoing manipulation by the eternal consensus. Zara approached one of the control interfaces. The transmission will be impossible to stop or counter. Even if governments try to suppress the information, too many individuals will have experienced it directly. The truth will spread regardless of official policies. Marcus studied the device, noting the elegant way it combined technologies that his training told him should be incompatible. How do you know it will work? Because it incorporates principles that the ancient humans discovered, but never had the chance to implement, Valdric replied. Your ancestors understood that consciousness and quantum mechanics are connected at fundamental levels. This device exploits those connections to bypass all conventional communication barriers. When do you activate it? As soon as you provide the final component, Zara said, pointing to an empty slot in the device's core. The engine requires a genetic template from an unenhanced human descendant of the Terran hegemony. Someone whose DNA contains the complete ancient patterns without technological modifications. Marcus looked at the slot, then at the two beings, who had turned his life upside down in a matter of weeks. You need my DNA? Not just your DNA, Valdric explained. We need your conscious participation. The engine works by creating a quantum entanglement between the transmitter and every sentient mind in the galaxy. That connection requires a living consciousness to serve as the initial template. What does that mean for me? It means that for the duration of the transmission, your mind will be linked to every thinking being in the galaxy. You will experience their thoughts, their emotions, their memories, just as they will experience yours and the historical truths we are revealing. Zara placed a hand on his shoulder. It will be overwhelming, possibly dangerous. No one has ever attempted quantum consciousness bridging on this scale. But without it, the galaxy will continue to live under the consensus's artificial limitations until the next engineered catastrophe destroys another generation of civilizations. Marcus thought about the implications. If they succeeded, the revelation would destabilize the current galactic order. Governments would fall, political systems would collapse, and the careful balance of power that had maintained peace for millennia would be shattered. But if they failed to act, humanity and other developing species would face the same fate as the ancient civilizations. How long do I have to decide? The consensus is already moving against humanity, Valdric said grimly. Our agents report increased military activity near human space. They are preparing to implement the same protocols they used against the Terran hegemony. If we are going to act, it must be soon. Marcus looked around at the coalition members working on the revelation engine. Beings from civilizations that had supposedly been extinct for thousands of years, united by their desire to prevent the next artificial catastrophe. For the first time since leaving Earth, he felt like he truly understood his purpose in the galaxy. What do I need to do? The classified human archives painted a picture that made Marcus question everything he thought he knew about Earth's history. Buried deep in archaeological reports were references to artifacts that didn't fit the accepted timeline of human development. Stone structures with mathematical precision that should have been impossible for ancient cultures. Metal alloys found in prehistoric sites that required advanced smelting techniques. Cave paintings that seemed to show star maps with accurate stellar positions. Most intriguing were the genetic studies. Human DNA contained what scientists called junk sequences, genetic material that seemed to serve no purpose. But according to the classified reports, some of these sequences showed signs of artificial modification. They contained patterns that were too regular to be natural, too complex to be random mutations. Marcus cross-referenced the human data with Zara's Etherian files, and the connections were undeniable. The junk sequences in human DNA matched genetic markers found in the ancient galactic records. The unexplained artifacts on Earth used the same mathematical principles described in Terran hegemony, technical manuals. The cave paintings showed star positions that corresponded to documented human colonies from 50,000 years ago. Humanity hadn't evolved on Earth. They had crash-landed there, survivors of a galactic catastrophe that had destroyed their civilization. Over thousands of years, they had lost their advanced knowledge and had to rebuild from primitive conditions. But the genetic memory remained, buried in their DNA, occasionally surfacing as inexplicable insights and innovations. Marcus was deep in analysis when his door chimed again. This time it was Zara, but she looked different. Gone were the academic robes and practical jumpsuit. Instead, she wore form-fitting black clothing that seemed to absorb light, and her silver hair was pulled back in a severe style that emphasized the sharp angles of her face. "We need to leave," she said without preamble. "Now, what's wrong?" "Station security is preparing to arrest you. Administrator Vex received new intelligence about your activities. They know you accessed the classified human archives, and they suspect you have Etherian historical data." Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. "How do you know this?" "Because I have been monitoring station communication since I gave you the data device." Zara stepped into his quarters and began disconnecting his personal equipment. "The Galactic Council has protocols for dealing with dangerous historical revisionism. They will detain you indefinitely and classify all your research." "Why would they do that?" "Because the current galactic order depends on everyone believing that the ancient powers are gone forever," Zara explained as she worked. "If humanity's true heritage becomes public knowledge, it will destabilize the political balance that has kept peace for millennia." Marcus grabbed his few personal belongings and the data devices. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe where you can continue your research without interference." Zara led him toward the rear exit of his quarters. "There are others who believe the galaxy needs to know the truth about its history." They moved through maintenance corridors that Marcus hadn't known existed, avoiding the main thoroughfares where security cameras would spot them. Zara seemed to know the station's layout perfectly, leading him through a maze of service tunnels and emergency passages. "How long have you been planning this?" Marcus asked as they climbed through a vertical shaft. "Since the moment I detected your biological signature," Zara replied. "I have been waiting decades for confirmation that the ancient humans had survived. Your presence here proves that the Terran hegemony's genetic legacy is intact." They emerged in a cargo bay that Marcus didn't recognize. A sleek ship waited there, its design unlike anything he had seen in the station's docking areas. The hull seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, and there were no visible engines or weapons ports. "Etherian technology," Zara explained, seeing his confusion. "We have maintained some capabilities from the ancient times." As they boarded the ship, Marcus noticed other figures moving in the shadows of the cargo bay. Some were clearly Etherian, but others belonged to species he didn't recognize. All wore the same light-absorbing black clothing that Zara had put on. "Who are these people?" "Members of the Coalition of Ancient Lineages," Zara said as the ship's systems came to life around them. "Descendants of the civilizations that survived the Convergence War. We have been working in secret for thousands of years, preserving the true history and waiting for the right moment to reveal it." The ship lifted off silently, somehow avoiding the station's traffic control and security systems. Through the viewport, Marcus watched Station Kepler 442 shrink into the distance. He was leaving behind his old life, his career, his simple understanding of the universe. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now you learn the full truth," Zara replied. "The Convergence War never really ended. The forces that destroyed the ancient civilizations are still active, still working to prevent any return to the old ways. They have agents throughout the current Galactic Council, maintaining the fiction that the galaxy is more peaceful now than it was before." "What forces? Who destroyed the Terran hegemony?" Zara was quiet for a moment, her violet eyes focused on something beyond the viewport. "They call themselves the Eternal Consensus, a coalition of species that believe galactic civilization is too dangerous when it becomes too advanced. They have been manipulating galactic politics for 50,000 years, ensuring that no single species or civilization grows powerful enough to threaten their control." "And they're still active?" "Very much so. They have been watching humanity's rapid development with growing concern. Your species' return to space, your quick adaptation to galactic technology, your innovative solutions to problems that have stumped other species. All of this has triggered their attention." The ship entered hyperspace, the stars outside becoming streaks of light. Marcus felt the familiar sensation of faster-than-light travel, but something was different. The journey felt smoother, more natural, as if the ship was working with the fabric of space rather than forcing its way through it. The technology your ancestors developed was fundamentally different from what the galaxy uses now, Zara explained. Noticing his reaction, they understood that space and time are not obstacles to be overcome, but partners to be worked with. That understanding made them incredibly powerful and incredibly dangerous to those who prefer a more controlled galactic order. So the Eternal Consensus destroyed them to prevent competition. The consensus believes that advanced civilizations inevitably lead to catastrophic wars. They point to the Convergence War as proof that galactic powers cannot coexist peacefully. Their solution is to maintain artificial limits on technological and political development. Marcus thought about Earth's history, the countless wars, the near destruction of the planet through nuclear weapons and environmental damage, the struggle to achieve even basic space travel. Had humanity's development been artificially slowed? Were they recovering capabilities that should have been theirs all along? How many species are part of your coalition? He asked. Fewer than we would like, more than the consensus suspects, Zara replied cryptically. The Etherians, the Void Dancers, the Crystal Dynasties, and several others. We have been preparing for decades, waiting for the right catalyst to begin revealing the truth. And you think I'm that catalyst? I think humanity is that catalyst. Your species has the genetic memory of the ancient powers, but you also have 50,000 years of experience learning to survive as underdogs. You understand both strength and wisdom in ways that the original Terran hegemony never did. The ship began to decelerate, and new stars appeared outside the viewport. They were approaching a system that didn't appear on any galactic charts Marcus had studied. A massive space station hung in orbit around a blue-white star, its architecture clearly ancient but still functional. Welcome to Haven Station, Zara said, the last free library in the galaxy, where the true history of our civilizations is preserved and protected. As they docked, Marcus realized that his simple mission as a cultural liaison had become something far more significant. He wasn't just learning about humanity's past. He was about to become part of a secret war that had been raging for millennia, a conflict that would determine the future of galactic civilization itself. Marcus spent the next 2 days staring at the crystalline device Zara had given him, afraid to activate it. Every time he picked it up, questions flooded his mind. What if she was wrong? What if she was right? Either possibility seemed to turn his understanding of reality upside down. Finally, curiosity won over caution. He locked his door, dimmed the lights, and inserted the device into his personal data terminal. The screen flickered to life, displaying symbols he didn't recognize. Then his universal translator kicked in, converting the ancient Etherian script into readable text. The first file contained biological data that meant little to him: genetic sequences, protein structures, and molecular analysis reports. But even with his limited scientific knowledge, he could see the similarities Zara had mentioned. The ancient samples and his own species shared identical markers in dozens of key areas. The second file contained historical records, and these were far more disturbing. The document spoke of a galactic civilization known as the Terran hegemony, a loose confederation of human-settled worlds that had existed roughly 50,000 years ago. According to Etherian records, the hegemony had been one of the most technologically advanced civilizations of its time. Marcus read about human worlds that spanned 3 galactic arms, about technologies that could manipulate space and time, about a people who seemed to excel at adapting alien technologies to their own needs. The descriptions matched many of humanity's current traits: their ability to work with multiple alien technologies, their rapid learning curve, their talent for finding innovative solutions. Then came the records of the collapse. The files were fragmentary, but they painted a picture of catastrophic warfare. Something called the Convergence War had torn the galaxy apart. Ancient powers had clashed using weapons that could destroy entire star systems. The Terran hegemony, caught in the middle of the conflict, had been systematically targeted by unknown enemies. The final entry in the historical records was dated roughly 48,000 years ago. It described the fall of humanity's last major world and the scattering of the survivors. Many had fled to the galactic rim, to remote systems far from the areas of conflict. Earth was mentioned by name as one of several refuge worlds where human populations might have survived. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his mind reeling. If these records were accurate, Earth hadn't been humanity's birth world, it had been their hiding place. The evolution of human civilization had actually been a slow recovery from near extinction, a gradual rebuilding of lost knowledge and capabilities. The third file contained technical specifications that made even less sense to him than the biological data. Descriptions of faster-than-light technologies that seemed to work on completely different principles than current galactic standard drives. References to weapon systems that could manipulate matter at the quantum level. Design notes for ships that could apparently phase in and out of normal space. The most intriguing section dealt with something called adaptive integration protocol techniques that allowed human technology to interface with and improve alien systems. The document suggested that ancient humans had possessed an almost supernatural ability to understand and modify technologies from other species, often creating hybrid systems that worked better than the original designs. As Marcus studied the files, he began to understand why Zara had warned him to be careful. If humanity really was the descendant of an ancient galactic power, their return to space might trigger old fears and rivalries. Other species might view them as a threat to the current galactic order. A soft chime from his door interrupted his thoughts. Marcus quickly closed the files and opened the door to find Administrator Vex standing in the corridor. Her forearms crossed in a gesture he had learned indicated serious displeasure. "Human Marcus Chen," she said, "we need to discuss your recent activities." Marcus felt his heart rate spike. "Is there a problem with my work?" "Your work performance has been adequate," Vex replied, stepping into his quarters without invitation. "However, station security has reported that you have been meeting with individuals who are not registered for cultural exchange activities. I've met with many beings on the station. That's part of my job. This individual is different." Vex activated a holographic projector, displaying an image of Zara. Etherian designation Zara 7 Prime. She is not a xenobiologist as she claimed. According to our records, she is a member of the Etherian Historical Preservation Society, an organization with political interests. Marcus tried to keep his expression neutral. She seemed interested in human biology from a scientific perspective. "We just talked about cultural differences." The Etherian Historical Preservation Society has been flagged by Galactic Council security as a potential destabilizing influence, Vex continued. They believe that ancient civilizations should be restored to their former prominence, regardless of current political arrangements. Some members have been linked to separatist movements and archaeological theft. "I wasn't aware of any of that," Marcus said truthfully. Vex studied him with her large black eyes. "I believe you, human. Your species is too new to galactic politics to understand the implications. However, I must warn you to avoid further contact with this individual. The stability of the station depends on maintaining proper protocols." After Vex left, Marcus sat on his bed, staring at the hidden data device. Everything was becoming more complicated. Zara might have her own agenda, but the historical records seemed genuine. The biological evidence was impossible to fake. Yet Administrator Vex's warning suggested that even discussing humanity's possible ancient heritage could be dangerous. Over the next few days, Marcus threw himself into his regular duties with renewed intensity. He helped resolve conflicts, facilitated cultural exchanges, and filed detailed reports on interspecies interactions. But beneath the surface, his mind was constantly processing the implications of what he had learned. He began to notice things he had missed before. The way certain alien species reacted when they first encountered humans. Not just curiosity, but something that looked almost like recognition. The ease with which human technology interfaced with alien systems, even when the engineering principles should have been incompatible. The frequency with which humans found innovative solutions to problems that had stumped other species for generations. Most telling was an incident in the engineering section. A group of crystalline engineers had been struggling with a power distribution problem for days. Marcus, who had some basic engineering training, took one look at their setup and suggested a modification that seemed obvious to him. The crystallines implemented his suggestion, and the problem was solved within hours. Afterward, one of the senior engineers approached him privately. "How did you know to make that adjustment?" the crystal being asked, its voice resonating through the translation device. "It just seemed logical," Marcus replied. "The power flow needed to be balanced differently. That solution required understanding principles that your species should not have discovered yet," the engineer said. Your technological development timeline suggests you are still centuries away from that level of knowledge. Marcus felt a chill. Maybe I just got lucky. Perhaps, the engineer replied, but its tone suggested it didn't believe that explanation. That night, Marcus made a decision. He activated a secure communication link and sent a coded message to Earth, requesting access to humanity's deepest archaeological and historical archives. If the truth about humanity's past was hidden somewhere, he was going to find it. The response came back within hours, access granted, with a priority flag that meant his request had gone straight to the highest levels of human government. Someone on Earth was very interested in what he was looking for. As Marcus began downloading terabytes of previously classified human historical data, he realized that his simple assignment as a cultural liaison had turned into something much more significant. He was no longer just helping species get along. He might be uncovering the greatest secret in galactic history. Marcus stared at the alien girl, waiting for her to finish her sentence, but she seemed frozen in place. Her violet eyes were wide with shock, and her breathing had become shallow and rapid. The glowing patterns on her skin pulsed faster, creating an almost hypnotic light show in the dim corridor. "I was what?" Marcus asked gently, trying not to startle her further. She blinked several times as if coming out of a trance. "Forgive me," she said, stepping back quickly. "I made a mistake. Your scent reminded me of someone I once knew. It is impossible, of course. Please excuse my strange behavior." Before Marcus could respond, she turned and walked away rapidly, her silver hair flowing behind her like liquid mercury. He watched her disappear around a corner, feeling more confused than ever. In his 3 weeks on the station, he had encountered many alien species, but none had reacted to him so strongly. Marcus closed his door and sat at his desk, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The girl had seemed familiar somehow, though he was certain he had never seen her before. And her reaction to his scent was puzzling. Humans did have a distinctive smell compared to other species, something to do with their carbon-based biology and the particular mix of pheromones they produced. But no alien had ever reacted so dramatically to it. The next morning, Marcus asked Administrator Vex about the strange visitor. Vex's forearms moved in what Marcus had learned was the Altarian equivalent of a shrug. "Many species pass through this station," she said. "Without more specific details, I cannot identify your visitor. However, if she returns and causes problems, please report it immediately." Marcus tried to focus on his regular duties, but he found himself scanning the crowds in the common areas, looking for silver hair and violet eyes. He helped resolve a dispute between gas giant dwellers and rock world miners over atmospheric preferences in shared workspaces. He mediated a conflict between two trader groups who had different concepts of contract timing. But throughout each interaction, part of his mind remained focused on the mysterious girl. 3 days passed without any sign of her. Marcus began to think he had imagined the whole encounter, or at least exaggerated its importance in his memory. Then, while he was eating lunch in the main cafeteria, she appeared again. This time she approached more carefully, moving through the crowd with purposeful steps. She wore different clothes, a practical jumpsuit that suggested she worked somewhere on the station, but her distinctive features were unmistakable. Several other beings turned to look at her as she passed, indicating that her species was not common in this part of the galaxy. "Human Marcus Chen," she said, stopping at his table. "May I join you?" Marcus gestured to an empty chair. "Of course. I was hoping to see you again. I never got your name." "I am called Zara," she replied, sitting gracefully. "And I owe you an explanation for my behavior the other day. It was inappropriate and unprofessional." "What kind of work do you do here?" Marcus asked, noting the small tools and devices attached to her belt. "I am a xenobiologist, studying the interactions between different species' biological systems. The station provides an excellent laboratory for such research, with so many different forms of life in close proximity." Marcus nodded. That explained her interest in his scent. She would be naturally curious about the biological markers of different species. "So when you smelled me, it was just scientific curiosity?" Zara hesitated, her fingers tracing patterns on the table's surface. "Not exactly. Your species produces a unique combination of chemical signatures. Most are common to carbon-based life, but there are some components that are unusual." "Unusual how?" "They match patterns found in very old records. ancient biological signatures that were thought to be extinct. She looked directly at him, her violet eyes intense. Marcus, how much do you know about your species' history before joining the Galactic Council? The basic stuff everyone learns in school. Humans evolved on Earth, developed technology, started exploring space, and eventually made contact with galactic civilization. Why? Zara was quiet for a long moment, seeming to weigh her words carefully. There are gaps in the galactic historical records, periods where certain biological signatures appear and then vanish. Your scent matches one of those signatures, one from approximately 50,000 of your years ago. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. That's impossible. Humans have only had space travel for a few centuries. We've never been off Earth before that. That is what your official records state, Zara agreed. But biological signatures do not lie. The chemical markers I detected are identical to samples preserved in the ancient archives of my people. Your people keep very old records? The Etherians have existed for over 2 million standard years. We are one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy, and we have always been historians and record keepers. Our archives contain information about species and civilizations that vanished long before the current Galactic Council was formed. Marcus set down his food, no longer hungry. What exactly are you suggesting? I am suggesting that humans or beings identical to humans were present in this galaxy tens of thousands of years ago. They left traces, biological signatures, genetic markers, and then they disappeared. Until now, we thought that ancient human civilization was completely extinct. The cafeteria around them continued its normal bustle, but Marcus felt as if the universe had suddenly become a much larger and more mysterious place. If that's true, why doesn't anyone know about it? Why aren't there any records in human history? Perhaps because the disappearance was not voluntary, Zara said quietly. Ancient records speak of a great catastrophe that destroyed several advanced civilizations. The survivors scattered across the galaxy and many records were lost. It is possible that some humans escaped to remote worlds like Earth, where they had to start over. Marcus thought about Earth's history, the long periods of darkness between ancient civilizations, the mysterious gaps in the archaeological record, the legends of advanced peoples who seemed to vanish without explanation. Could some of those legends be racial memories of a spacefaring past? Why are you telling me this? He asked. Because if humans are truly the descendants of an ancient galactic civilization, it changes everything. Your species' rapid technological development, your adaptability, your ability to find solutions that older species cannot see. These could be inherited traits from your spacefaring ancestors. Zara reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device that looked like a crystalline data storage unit. These are copies of the relevant files from our archives, biological data, genetic patterns, and what few historical records remain from that time period. I think you should study them. Marcus took the device, feeling its weight in his palm. It was heavier than it looked, as if it contained more than just data. What am I supposed to do with this? That is your choice, Zara said, standing up. But if I am correct, your presence here is not coincidence. The galaxy may need humanity's ancient wisdom more than anyone realizes. She started to leave, then turned back. Marcus, be careful who you share this information with. There are those who would not welcome the return of the ancient powers. The galaxy has been stable for millennia under the current order. With that warning, she walked away, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and a device that might contain the secret history of his entire species. Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stepped off the transport shuttle onto Station Kepler 442. The artificial gravity felt lighter than Earth's, making each step feel like a small bounce. Around him, dozens of alien species moved through the massive docking bay with practiced ease. Some floated on anti-gravity platforms, others skittered on multiple legs, and a few towered above everyone else with their crystalline bodies catching the overhead lights. This was his first assignment outside the Sol system, and everything felt overwhelming. The Universal Translation Corps had trained him for 6 months, but nothing could prepare someone for the reality of standing among beings from across the galaxy. The air recyclers worked overtime to accommodate different atmospheric needs, creating a strange mix of scents that made his nose twitch. Marcus clutched his assignment tablet tighter. He was here as a cultural liaison, part of humanity's effort to build better relationships with alien civilizations. Earth had only joined the Galactic Council 3 years ago. making humans the newest members of an organization that had existed for over 10,000 years. The station bustled with activity. Traders from the Zephyrian Empire negotiated deals with insectoid merchants from the Hive Collective. A group of energy beings from the Photon realm flickered in and out of visibility as they communicated through light patterns. Near the central information kiosk, several reptilian saurians discussed mining rights in heated tones that their translators converted into angry beeps. Marcus found his assigned quarters in the human section of the station. The room was small but comfortable, with a bed, desk, and a viewport showing the purple nebula that surrounded the station. He unpacked his few belongings and reviewed his mission briefing one more time. His job was simple in theory but complex in practice. He needed to observe interactions between different species, identify potential sources of conflict, and help smooth over cultural misunderstandings. Humans were still learning about galactic politics, and every bit of information helped Earth's position in the Council. The next morning, Marcus reported to the Cultural Exchange Center. The building rose 30 levels above the main deck, with each floor dedicated to different aspects of interspecies cooperation. His supervisor, Administrator Vex, was a tall, blue-skinned Altarian with forearms and large black eyes that seemed to look right through him. "Human Marcus Chen," Vex said, consulting a holographic display that floated between two of her hands. "Your species has an interesting reputation. Very young, very aggressive, but also surprisingly adaptable. We shall see how you perform." She assigned him to monitor the common areas where different species gathered. The cafeteria, recreation decks, and shopping districts were where most conflicts started. Cultural misunderstandings could escalate quickly when beings from different worlds tried to share the same space. Marcus spent his first week watching and learning. He saw how the methane-breathing titans avoided certain areas where oxygen levels were too high. He noticed that the Crystalline Confederation members became agitated when exposed to certain sound frequencies. The insectoid Clixians preferred darker spaces and became nervous under bright lights. Each species had evolved under different conditions, creating unique needs and preferences. What seemed normal to one group could be deeply offensive or physically uncomfortable to another. Marcus began to understand why Administrator Vex had called the job complex. On his 8th day, Marcus was observing the main recreation deck when he noticed a commotion near the gaming section. A group of Saurian traders had surrounded one of the holographic combat simulators, arguing loudly with a Clixian merchant. Their translators were working overtime, but the emotional context was getting lost in translation. Marcus approached carefully, activating his own translation device. The argument centered around gaming rules and what constituted fair play. The Saurians, being naturally competitive, saw certain strategies as skillful. The Clixian, coming from a hive mind culture, viewed the same strategies as cheating because they relied on individual deception rather than collective coordination. Neither group was wrong according to their own cultural values, but they couldn't understand each other's perspective. Marcus stepped forward, introducing himself as a cultural liaison. He explained the different viewpoints to each group, helping them see how their backgrounds shaped their understanding of competition and cooperation. The argument cooled down, and both groups agreed to play by modified rules that accommodated their different approaches. It was a small victory, but Marcus felt proud of making his first real contribution to interspecies harmony. Word of his success spread quickly through the station's administrative network. Over the following days, other staff members began calling on him to help with similar situations. A dispute between energy beings and solid matter species over shared spaces. A misunderstanding between traders who measured time differently. A conflict over food preparation methods that violated religious taboos. Each situation taught Marcus something new about galactic civilization. Humanity's recent arrival meant they had fewer established prejudices and cultural blind spots. Other species had been dealing with each other for millennia, sometimes developing rigid assumptions about how things should work. Marcus found that his human perspective often provided fresh solutions to old problems. Where other species saw insurmountable differences, he saw opportunities for creative compromise. His background in human history helped too. Earth's many cultures had spent centuries learning to coexist, providing useful examples for interspecies cooperation. 3 weeks into his assignment, Marcus was reviewing reports in his quarters when his door chimed. He opened it to find a young alien female standing in the corridor. She was unlike any species he had encountered before, humanoid in basic shape but with pale lavender skin, silver hair that seemed to move on its own, and large violet eyes that held an ancient wisdom, despite her apparently youthful appearance. She wore simple gray robes that looked like they belonged to some kind of religious or academic order. Most striking were the intricate patterns that seemed to be tattooed or naturally occurring along her arms and neck. They glowed faintly with an inner light that pulsed in rhythm with her breathing. "Are you the human liaison?" she asked in perfect, unaccented standard Galactic. Her voice was melodious but carried an undertone of urgency. "Yes, I'm Marcus Chen. How can I help you?" She stepped closer and Marcus caught a faint scent, something like flowers mixed with ozone and starlight. It was impossible to describe but oddly familiar, like a half-remembered dream. The alien girl's eyes widened suddenly, and she stopped cold, her entire body going rigid. She leaned closer, inhaling deeply, and her expression changed to one of complete shock. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper filled with disbelief and something that might have been hope. "You were